We have a 2009 Chevrolet Suburban. We're going to go through the steps in order to replace the fuel pump. Before doing any fuel system repair, we'll bleed the pressure off the system. We'll do this by using our pressure relief valve on our pressure gauge. Be sure and capture the fuel into a safe container. We'll disconnect the negative battery cable before beginning the repair. In order to do a proper fuel pump replacement, we need to clean the inside of the tank, and that will require the removal of the tank. At the rear of the tank, disconnect the fuel filler and vent line. Disconnect the two emissions lines from the carbon canister. Disconnect the emissions line at the front right corner of the tank. To disconnect the fuel line fitting at the front of the tank, to gain access to this fitting, you'll have to reach over the front cross member. This fitting can be very difficult to see. You may be tempted to lower the tank slightly in order to gain access to this fitting. This could damage the nylon line. Be sure and capture any residual fuel. With the fuel tank properly supported, remove the tank straps. With the tank slightly lowered, disconnect the rear emissions line. This line goes up over the crossmember and will have to be disconnected before lowering the tank very far. Lower the tank further to disconnect the electrical connections. Be sure and remove the safety retainer on the fuel pump connection. Remove the tank from under the vehicle and clean the top of the tank before removing the module assembly. With the outside of the tank thoroughly cleaned, we'll disconnect the emissions line and the fuel line on the module assembly. Using a non-ferrous brass punch, we'll turn the locking ring counterclockwise. Be sure and inspect the locking ring, making sure it's not damaged in any way that would hinder its reuse. As you remove the module assembly from the tank, you'll have to disconnect the emissions line. Keep in mind there's a reservoir at the bottom of the module assembly that will hold residual fuel. Be sure and capture this into a safe container. At this point, we need to drain the remaining fuel into a safe container and then clean the inside of the tank. We want to be sure that the tank is as clean as possible to allow a clean environment for the fuel pump. With the inside of the tank thoroughly cleaned, we're ready to install the new Airtex module assembly. Remove the emissions line retaining clip from the old module assembly. Install it into the emissions line fitting. With the module partially in the tank, reconnect the emissions line. Install the tank seal. Seat the module assembly into proper location. Install the locking ring, turning it clockwise with a non-ferrous brass punch. Reconnect the emissions line and fuel line. Reinstall the lines into the retaining bracket. With the tank partially raised into position, reconnect the electrical connections. Be sure and reinstall a safety retainer on the fuel pump connector. As you raise the tank into position, be sure and fish the emissions line over the top of the crossmember. Before fully raising the tank into position, reattach the emissions line at the back of the tank. With the tank fully raised into position, reinstall the tank straps. At the rear of the tank, reconnect the two emissions lines to the carbon canister. Reconnect the fuel vent line. Reconnect the fuel filler hose. At the front of the tank, reconnect the emissions line and the fuel line. With the repair complete, reattach the negative battery cable. Cycle the key 3 to 4 times in order to charge the system. Start the vehicle and monitor fuel pressure, making sure it's within vehicle specifications. Now before we remove our pressure gauge, we'll shut the vehicle off and bleed the pressure using our pressure gauge, making sure to capture any fuel into a safe container.